Welcome to episode 10 of our Restorers podcast. I'm really excited that you've chosen to join us today. I'm Jack Crowley, president of Water Street, and today we're going to be focusing on another element of our whole person model here at Water Street as we work with our guests, specifically life skills. And life skills is big, right? So we're actually going to focus today around issues related to finance, to money and our relationship to finances and money and how that impacts our guests who are experiencing homelessness. And I'm super excited today that we're going to have a guest from the Chalmers Center who actually we're engaging with the Chalmers Center to provide training for our staff around faith and finances so that we can better prepare and equip our guests to understand their relationship to money and to understand finances in a way that can be meaningful for them, and hopefully they can thrive as they leave us. So we're excited for this conversation with the Chalmers Center and glad that you chose to join us today. As I said, I'm so excited to have our guest from the Chalmers Center today. So I'd like to introduce to our audience Eugene Norris. Eugene is a lead trainer with the Chalmers Center, and he does training on both work life and on faith and finance. So welcome. Thanks for joining us, Eugene.
I'm excited to be here very much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And so the Chalmers Center, I first was introduced to the work of the Chalmers Center through the writings of Brian Fickert, and starting with When Helping Hurts and some of his other writings. And our team is going to be engaging and actually beginning some training through the Chalmers Center on faith and finance. But Eugene, I'd love to hear, how did you first get involved with the Chalmers Center?
Well, I say it's a God thing because I was working with a number of outreach ministries through my church and other churches. And we were working with a variety of people and communities. And I read the book When Helping Hurts, and it really shifted my whole paradigm around what is poverty. And it fit with this whole ministry notion of kingdom work. So as I worked with shamans more and more, uh, I discovered that their philosophy about holistically looking at the whole person, that we're more than just our situations, our mind, our body, our spirit, our heart, all of that, we're very spiritual beings. And their approach to working with people and supporting ministries is based on that philosophy and the notion of broken systems and poverty being something that we all
Yeah.
experience. We come together because helping you on your journey helps me on my journey.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the things that really attracted us to the Chalmers Center and the training that you guys offer is that alongside it's about coming alongside, and that fits with Water Street, our core philosophy and mission. It's all about walking alongside people on their journey, including ours. And thinking specifically about finances, since that's kind of the topic we're digging into today. Um, but recognizing poverty is not just about material poverty and finances. I love on the Chalmers website, they have a statement about they want to take a biblical approach to poverty. Helping the poor isn't just about giving them stuff, it's about healing the brokenness at its roots. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Like, as specifically, we're going to come alongside our guests, maybe even families in the community who are struggling with their finances, but it's not going to be an approach that's just about finances. It's more than that.
And all of our kingdom work is never just about any one thing.
Right.
Uh, it is about the kingdom. And we often say that the kingdom is an upside down version of what we call ourselves our current society. And the the Lord has set up certain principles that He has instilled in His creation, and those principles work. We have, in our brokenness, have redefined certain things like finances and linked them to people's identity. Your worth is tied to that. That whole capitalistic story. And our story and God's story is not about wealth being tied to money and tied to possessions. Our His kingdom is about how He provides what we need, and our job is to give it away. And in the process of giving it away, we actually receive. And so one of the biggest things that in working with communities where people have not always had the most strongest financial identity and success is redefining their whole picture of who they are and who is God in their lives. And one of the first things to do is to step back and look at how he has already sustained you and what have you been doing with the resources he's given you, and then stepping into there is a better way. And that's where the scripture comes in, and the principles around the scriptures teach us how God wants us to handle his resources, and therefore we are always in abundance.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that amazes me in many of the relationships that I have with our guests here and other families through the years is the level of resiliency. People whose incomes may not be of a certain level, but like the depth of resiliency and being able to carry through and thrive when I don't know if I could in those situations. Like because I've my relationship with money is such that I feel like I need a certain amount in order to be comfortable and to thrive. And watching the resiliency of others, but that speaks a little bit to again, where's my identity coming from, and how does that affect the way I relate to people?
And I come from a background family that uh, materialistically and would actually fit the poverty level. Uh, I jokingly say I didn't really realize we were poor until I actually got in college and discovered the social definition of poorness. But the point being, we had various ways that we survived and we depended on each other. And one of my first experience with faith and finance was working with a group of uh, men and women who had just recently completed rehab and released from prison, and they were striking out on their own. And of course, they were struggling. How do I survive? And one of the first things we did was to first of all look at what resources do you have? Money, in addition to money, what skills, what gifts, what contacts, what let's look at all the things that God has put in your hand, as he told, Moses, what's in your hand? And then look at how we use those resources.
Right.
Is my money going towards something of some value with some purpose that is beyond myself and brings glory back to God? When you change those principles, then you look at not how much money I have, it's what am I doing with that money, and what is the purpose of that, and how do I give God praise for what he has given me, because his principle is that if you give him praise and you give it back, it tends to come back.
Right.
But
Right.
he also tells us to plan.
Building off of that, I think when we look around the church, the body of Christ in general, there's not a lot of great training available around how to relate to finances, how to manage finances and steward them. And the stuff that is there is some out there, but most of it is geared towards people who are at a certain income level or above. And there's some good trainers. I'm not going to go into who and what, but there are some out there. But there's very little out there that really comes back down and addresses what about when you're only making 13 $14 an hour. Or I mean the reality that some of our guests, some of our families that we connect with, they're working two full-time minimum wage jobs in order to pay the rent. And you take a Christian financial literacy class and you're talking about investment portfolios, and you're talking about the value of different types of mortgages or approaches, like should I rent or should I buy, when some of our families are like, should I buy groceries or should I pay my rent? And so faith and finances for us is going to start at a different place, right? And I know you've worked in this, you've worked with individuals in it, but you've also trained churches to come alongside people. Could you speak a little bit about that? It's a different mindset, a different approach to how do we, but they both need to be rooted in sound principles of stewardship and our relationship with God.
And that's probably the biggest thing that attracted me to faith and finance is that it's more than a class about budgeting and all of that. It is really about a community coming together, both your participants and those who may come alongside as mentors in the program. We always have others who are there as we call them mentors or allies, and their first and foremost is to establish a relationship with everyone in the class. You establish a relationship that uh, we realize that we all have something to bring to the table. We also, in that process in faith and finance, we demonstrate that by we have a collaborative meal at the beginning of each meeting. We might have a salad, and somebody may bring some carrots one day, or somebody may bring sandwich and bread, and that is the model that we are all coming together to bring something to the table. And in the process of that, we start asking questions: Who is God, and who am I, and what has He been doing in my life? And as we begin to look at that, we look at what one of the first activities is for everybody to keep track of what they have spent with money during a given week. And the activities are very relational and dialogue driven. So you're always I may not know a lot about I may not have a lot of money, but I can certainly have a conversation about what I do with my money. And in the process of looking at that, we begin to have some conversations. You discover that the resilience of people, how they have managed to save money, however small, or as they're looking and they're saying, "Hey, I spent $15 this month on Pepsi Cola." And the scriptures you use in faith and finance begin to take us back to God's message. And we begin to realize, well, what I discovered that the participants realize the most, and I hear it the most often, I never thought that God was this interested in my finances. They don't see that God is a God of reconciliation in all things. So as we begin to share things, then we look at here's some good practices. Faith and finance will then say, here's some practices. Let's try this. Let's try this. What have you done? So that no one comes to the table feeling like I know more than anybody else. Everybody puts their stories and their journeys together around a good financial framework and look at some good practices, and we begin to work out what works best for our lifestyle and for our purpose, and then we practice it. Because Chalmers follows a process of we build on what you already know, then we add a little bit more on top of that, then we do some collaborative practice with it in class, and then each lesson you walk away and you implement something.
Yeah, I love that the principles, tie into we do this together. It's not you're not going out there on your own. And even as we walk with our guests, it's not just we're going to isolate and focus only on finances for this period of time. We're going to do 2 months intensive just about finances, get you the tools, train you. But I love that rhythm of, taking what you already have, building on it, practicing it, coming back and sharing those experiences. That's such an important kind of rhythm to our learning. And it reflects what we're doing in a lot of other areas here at Water Street. And so then we can bring these financial principles and skills that'll be developed over time, but into the whole picture of how am I growing in wholeness as an individual and in relationship to the community around me. Because the brokenness it's not just, man, I would have never become homeless if I knew, if I had better budgeting skills. That's rarely the reason why somebody shows up. But budgeting skills are incredibly important as we're exiting out and we're going back into the community or we're finding our own apartment. If we don't develop budgeting skills, we could end up back. But it's not the root cause, right?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And we don't always know everyone's brokenness. It may appear to be, like you said, well, I'm in this situation because I don't handle money well, or then, okay, that's because I don't have any money. So therefore, that's a negative story. The cause of that may be that I just don't really know who I am.
Hmm.
I don't realize, what's my purpose? What are my gifts? Everybody is not going to be a college graduate. Everybody is not going to be an engineer. Someone is going to be uh, an artist, maybe a starving artist, but God has put them there for the purpose that there is something He wants to do with you and your journey.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's a great lead in, Eugene, because the second part of our podcast, which we're going to start in a moment, is with one of our Step Up life coaches, Ruth Reyes Vega. And she's going to be sharing actually some real practical and tangible stories of some of our guests and the struggles they've had with finances and how we're hoping to help kind of break through that next level of understanding who they are, how they relate to finances, how they relate to their community in a way that's healthy and reflects their identity in Christ. And so I appreciate Eugene having this conversation with you today to give another insight into just the challenges our guests face in understanding it's not just about learning how to budget, but it's learning about our relationships with one another, with the world, with the resources God's given us. And that's what we're trying to do here at Water Street. So Eugene, thank you so much, and blessings in your work with the Chalmers Center and all your other ministry.
And thank you for having me, and prayers and blessings for your continual work.
Thank you so much. I want to give a profound thanks to our Season 1 podcast sponsor, Rogers & Associates, who's helping us tremendously in this first year of the Restorers podcast. They're a wealth management firm that helps clients become financially independent for retirement. You can learn more about them online at rogers-associates.com or by calling 717-560-3800. That's Rogers, RODGERS-associates.com, or by calling 717-560-3800. Thank you so much, Rogers & Associates. So welcome back. We're excited for the second half of our conversation today as we continue to look at the different elements of our whole person model. And one of them is our relationship to finances. And just grateful for the conversation we had with our friends from the Chalmers Center. And now we get to take a look inside Water Street with one of our friends here, Ruth Reyes Vega, who's one of our Step Up coaches. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here today. And Step Up is actually our program that works with people around career and vocation, but obviously that ties closely with finances.
It definitely does. When I first started and I got this position, I thought it would be more focused on career, education, and coaching around those things. Then I find out finances is a piece of it. And to be totally transparent with you, I said to myself, I can't teach or coach anyone around finances if I myself am not walking in integrity when it comes to stewardship. So I recall that was about 2 years ago. I knew there were some areas in the area of finances. I knew there were some parts that I could do better. And when you know how to talk the talk, it's easy to give the impression that, yeah. But I wanted to come from a place of authenticity. I mean, at Water Street, it's one of our core values. So I spend a good amount of time just doing some reflection about my own relationship with money. And I started to realize there were some commonalities with some of the guests that I was serving and helping. And I thought to myself, it's so easy for me to think I'm in a better position than they are because the material lack is different, but the brokenness around my relationship with money was very similar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really, that touches on two things right away that I think are critical. We're going to jump right in.
Deep dive.
I think, you identified, one, the need for us as we work with our guests to understand our own brokenness too. And here you are being asked to step into an area of helping our guests where you recognize maybe I don't have it 100% all together myself right now. And I appreciate you sharing that right off the bat. And then secondly, just that it's not just about the skills. It's not just, you can be fantastic at math and be horrible with budgeting. right? Because it's not just about having the skills or the knowledge set. And maybe you could speak a little bit to that as far as have you begun working with our guests around those issues and yourself around those issues?
Absolutely. It's awesome to even hear from experts in Chalmers Center, because my understanding of brokenness and my relationship with my finances having some fractures in it, I also needed the practicality of just how to, the education on how to. So marrying both is just beautiful, and I think it's super necessary. I think a lot of us just tend to think, oh, well, we'll get a guest, we'll do the numbers. But we forget that a material lack and the inability to even keep a budget is just a symptom of something else that's going on. And if we don't treat the symptom, then this will continue. And what I love about just even the Water Street model is that, ironically, people would think, well, don't you find folks housing right away and jobs right away? Aren't you housing focused?
Right.
Well, housing is part of it, but we're healing focused.
Right.
And we're not wealth focused, but we're worth focused.
Yeah.
And in order to get there, we really have to tackle the brokenness that's inside. So I sit with a bunch of folks that are extremely just hurting in that area. And society kind of shapes what we think about it. Even ourselves, we come in with our own presuppositions as to why folks aren't working. Oh, they're just lazy. Why they misuse their money. Oh, they're just irresponsible. But then we have to ask ourselves, why are they? And we see it here at Water Street. There's generations that come in. You'll have a grandmother come in with her adult child who comes with her babies. So what is this generational pattern, and how can we tackle what's really going on deep down inside to help them sustain their housing, where they can keep a job? And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of love. It takes a lot of humility, even on our part, to kind of see myself and say, wait, I struggle with entitlement as well. The numbers may be different. The lack may look different. But I'm also begging for something too, begging for the acceptance, the love, and all. All those
Earlier,
things.
you were talking about, so step up, again, like we don't jump right into housing, right into a job with our guests. When they choose the residential track, we recognize there's going to be a journey, and step up only becomes a part of their journey during phase 2.
Correct.
And earlier you were talking about how like there's healing and there's kind of just new identity that's established as people come through phase 1, and part of your role in phase 2, as now you're beginning to talk about career, vocation, finances, how to manage all that. There's a stewardship aspect of the change that's happened. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that and how that plays in, because they're on a journey, and this is the next piece of the journey, but it's not a whole new thing.
Correct. It's fragile, and we need to be very aware of that. To think that because they transition from phase 1 to phase 2, that now they're ready automatically to just face all these things.
Let's go get a job. And
let's get a job.
Here's
let's
your
do
budget
this.
planning sheet. Go for it.
Yeah, you just went from inner healing, being poured into, and then the next day, go get a 40-hour-a-week job, and I'll see you when I see you. Here's a budget, fill it out, and let me know how that goes. That would be unloving. It would also almost re-traumatize them. It would, we would injure them and not be good stewards of what just happened in the last 4 to 6 months, which is awesome too, to just collaborate with other staff that are very front line during phase 1 and just understanding what this guest has been conquering, what they are going through.
So you're not starting with a blank slate or assumptions about them, because
Correct.
you can partner with their life coach, partner with the case manager that's been working with them.
Correct.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
and it's we're just a slice of the pie. It takes a village.
Yeah. You earlier, when we were talking before we started recording, you mentioned that the understanding of your worth and how that plays a role. We did a previous episode about employment and about career, and how it's not just about getting a job that pays X amount of dollars. And sometimes our guests even the idea of figuring out what's the right amount to make, what's sustainable. But there was an issue about worth. Like when you haven't worked for a while, when you've been down, and then you're at a place where you're going out to get a job. How do you see that play into somebody as they're getting that first interview and that first job offer? What do you see happen in the lives of our guests and some of the things you need to help them with?
Oftentimes they'll come into phase 2, they'll have a meeting with us, and when we start discussing options, I'll get this statement almost all the time. Well, I'll take anything. And the I'll take anything is very telling about how they see themselves. You and I can have gotten to a place where maybe we're like, well, I can't take anything. I need to take something that's going to just give me good quality of life, help me sustain my family, be a good steward, be able to give, be able to pour into the kingdom. And it's these standards that we've been able to achieve through Christ, knowing our identity in Christ, knowing our worth. And our guests are just coming into that.
Right.
That identity. And it's so awesome. One of my favorite things is to see a guest's face just light up when I tell them, you're worth more than just anything.
Yeah. So you get that first job offer for $9 an hour. And like, I got a job. And you're like,
Yeah, and
how do you break that to them? How do you
like,
in a way
man.
that's affirming and fulfilling?
Right, because I don't want to be the person with the like needle just popping,
right,
balloons. But I'll celebrate, that this achievement.
Somebody wants you.
Somebody wanted them. Somebody saw that they have something to offer. What's cool is as step-up coaches, we do assessments with them. And in the assessment, we like to call it the preferred future convo. And in that preferred future convo, I can always reference that and say, well, in your preferred future, there's a vehicle, there's an apartment, there's being able to provide this for your children. And I let the numbers talk. Can the $9 an hour job get you there?
Right.
And it answers itself.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep looking. There's no rush. It's what I love about working here is that we're not interested in just being a revolving door,
right,
meeting these physical or material needs.
Yeah.
We want to really help the whole person, and that's part of it. Yeah. Telling them, hey, the $9 hour job may not be it. So as a step-up coach, I may even discourage, let's stop looking for anything $9 an hour. And I'll get on the computer with them and I'll teach them, hey, look, there's ranges on hourly pay that you can insert here. And you'll see all the jobs that pay the money, the numbers that you need that will get you to that preferred future. And they're like, really? I can? And one or 2 months later, they're coming in the office. I just got offered a job making 18, twice as much.
Wow.
And they're like, they don't know what to do. Then at that point, as a step-up coach, because I understand, even culturally, when you go from making 0 to making 18, that's awesome. But as a coach, I'm like, okay, there's an area now that I have to coach in, because there's some dangers in going from nothing to 18.
Right.
And just being able to speak into that and just work around that. What's it like going from 0 to now you have $1,500 every 2 weeks and tackling the heart as far as entitlement. Well, I deserve this because now but it's not being a good steward of these finances.
And there's obviously the practical side of it of kind of you described before. How much is it going to cost for the car, for the apartment, for caring for your children in this way, and all those different elements of it. That practical side is really important. But maybe you could speak to your experience with our guests. What are the other challenges? Not just being able to put the numbers on paper and see it, because many of us can do that. Many of our guests could do that before they ended up at Water Street. But there are other factors in their relationship to money. How have you seen that play out? Maybe you could share an example or two of a guest and where you've seen that relationship to money in general just needing to be refined and get to a healthier place?
Sure. So I actually spent some time with a guest once, and I told them, don't change any of your financial habits for an entire week. Continue doing what you would normally do, but save every receipt and do a feelings journal around every time you purchased something or did something. How did you feel right before? And it created such an amazing conversation.
Wow.
Because the one day this guest went out and purchased takeout, they were feeling depressed. They wanted to get away. So just being able to see what's happening right before, what are the impulses that are getting you to make these decisions, because a lot of these decisions are affecting your bank account.
Yeah.
And if you're depressed, if you feel like checking out, if you feel like you deserve this reward, I'm not going to take away from the fact that those feelings are valid, but what are other ways that we can meet those needs? What's rewarding to you that doesn't cost money? And then we'll sit and we'll come up with a plan as to when you feel that way, what else can you do? That's not going to cost you $40.
How did they respond at the end of that exercise?
They just were blown away because they're like, I didn't realize that I was spending so much on my feelings.
Wow.
And one mother said to me, I just feel so bad having my children here. So I take them to McDonald's.
Yeah.
I take them here.
Right.
So it's tough. So you want to validate that. I can't imagine what it's like to be a mother in that position. But then bringing the gospel into it. And I tell guests all the time, especially moms, do not tell your children you're broke. That language, it starts to create something in their brains. You tell them, not today. Mommy doesn't have money for that today. I have money for other things. But on this day, but we'll create a budget if that's something you want to do.
Yeah.
Teaching them that self-denial and controlling impulses is a good thing.
Yeah. Delayed gratification.
Exactly. So, the conversations are awesome. I had another guest that as I'm doing his budget, we're writing everything down, and then he says, I spend $60 a month on cigarettes. So I write it down, and then I look at him, and I'm like, you never smell like cigarettes. I never see you in a smoke box. Do you smoke? I didn't even know you smoked. And he says, no, I don't smoke. I said, so help me understand, why you're spending $60 a month on cigarettes when you don't smoke. Oh, well, I like to buy it and just keep it on me and hand it out to the guys. It keeps me cool with them.
Wow.
I keep relationships with them.
Wow.
Had I not asked that question,
Yeah.
I would have never known.
Yeah.
So now I'm speaking to a man that's in his 50s, really struggling, almost like the little boy inside of him wants friends, wants to be accepted.
Acceptance and wow.
So I challenged him. I said, hey, let's take this and place these $60 somewhere else. This is going to be hard for you, but I want you to really spend time. And he has a mentor outside of here. So I encouraged him, talk to your mentor about how this feels.
Yeah.
And spend a little time just knowing who you are in Christ and that you bring something to these relationships that is so much more valuable than a cigarette.
Than a couple cigarettes,
Correct.
Wow.
And this grown man, tears in his eyes, was like, oh, okay. And he did it.
Wow.
He did it.
That would be a hard shift.
It was tough. And a couple people fell off his radar.
I'm sure.
But I told him, this is going to create such a filter for you.
Yeah.
But it's the positive thing is that the people that maintain relationship with you, you'll enjoy so much more because there won't be that question in your mind. Do they love me just because of what I'm doing?
And that story just helps show the interrelationship of so many of the aspects of our whole person model. And in our last episode, we were talking about relationships and safe people and the importance of building a network and community of friends and connections. And that can be done in unhealthy ways. But that's tied to this and then it has a financial burden on us. So here I'm trying to buy friendship. I mean, that's a callous way of saying it, but in essence, to break it down simply, there's so much more behind it, but buying friendship, are those going to be the kind of sustainable relationships that are going to help him in the future? Absolutely not, because as soon as he stops buying the cigarettes, some are going to fall away. But doing that process here with your guidance allowed him to then, one, probably improve his understanding and approach to finances, and two, his relationships. And that's so powerful and impactful. It's cool to hear.
Yeah, I was blessed to just be able to have that conversation. Yeah. And I have to be very discerning and loving as far as discussing finances with men. Even as a Hispanic woman, when I sit with a Hispanic man, I'm very aware, just from my worldview, how I grew up, that they really do find their identity in providing.
Right.
And I recall there was a pattern where they would talk to me about the kind of jobs they'd like and what they want to do. And then when it came to budget, they would say, I'm okay. I know what I'm doing. I got it. And I realized, I'm like, how can I find ways to build this man up and not make him feel like I see him as less of a man because of the position he's in right now. Yeah. So building that relationship, establishing that trust before I just toss a budget sheet in front of them is very important. Yeah. So a lot of relating will happen where I share my own brokenness in finances, and then they're like, okay, well, here's the truth. And all this will come out. Wow. But then they'll tackle it, they'll work on it, and you give them little wins, they start flexing those muscles, the confidence goes up, and then they'll come in the office and say, guess what? I just paid this $3,000 bill that was hanging over my head, and it's just like, wow, 6 months ago you were
that seemed in impossible, such a different, sure.
It seemed so far-fetched. Man, so it's pretty awesome.
Well, Ruth, so many good insights, so many good, those stories I think really help us understand that finances, it's so much more than just the black and white, the numbers on paper. It really, there's emotional ties to it. There's identity ties to it. And it's such a complicated issue. And I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for our Step Up team and our ability to walk alongside people in a relational way to help them get to a different place. And I hope our conversation today was helpful to you to understand this aspect of what we do here at Water Street and the challenge that so many of your neighbors may be facing, maybe even you, in our relationship to finances, to money, and the impact that can have on our lives. We're grateful for what God is doing here at Water Street, Ruth, through you and your team, and how that's impacting our guests. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.